History reveals a blueprint for collapse that repeats with terrifying precision. 3 governments fell following identical steps across 2.5 centuries. Today, in 2025, America walks the same path. Each stage matches perfectly. Each warning sign flashes red. Consider France in 1789, the apex of European civilization. Wealth flowed through Paris, culture flourished, power seemed absolute. 5 years later, the king lost his head. 40,000 citizens died in political purges. The terror consumed everyone, guilty and innocent alike. Russia, in 1917, controlled a vast empire. 180 million subjects bowed to the Tsar. The military machine appeared invincible after fighting the Great War. 8 months shattered everything. The Tsar fell, Bolsheviks seized control, 20 million perished. Cuba, in 1959, enjoyed Caribbean prosperity. American tourists filled casinos, money circulated freely, stability seemed guaranteed. 2 years destroyed that illusion. Castro dismantled the government, nationalized all property, imposed communist rule lasting 6 decades. 3 nations, 3 catastrophic collapses, 3 moments when seemingly unshakable power crumbled. Every ruling class missed the signals completely. They believed their position was permanent. They assumed the masses would never challenge authority. Their confidence proved fatal every time. Right now, every indicator that preceded those disasters exists in American society. Wealth concentration mirrors historical extremes. Government dysfunction breeds contempt. Institutional faith evaporates daily. The anger intensifies beneath the surface. We're not approaching the pattern, we're deep inside it. Understanding how governments actually fall reveals why math suggests America comes next. Revolution means total destruction of existing order, replacement with something entirely different. Often, something far worse emerges. Poverty alone never triggers revolution. Poverty has always existed throughout human civilization. Revolution ignites when expectations collide with reality, when populations believe they deserve better treatment, when the chasm between elites and everyone else becomes unbearably visible. Most critically, when faith dies that the system can repair itself, when people conclude that government, courts, elections cannot address their grievances. Kennedy understood this truth perfectly when he warned that blocking peaceful revolution guarantees violent revolution. History validates this principle without exception. France, Russia, Cuba followed identical 6-stage sequences despite different centuries and ideologies. The pattern transcends context completely. France in the 1780s represented European civilization's pinnacle. Paris commanded cultural authority globally. French dominated diplomatic discourse worldwide. Arts, philosophy, science all thrived magnificently. King Louis XVI inherited an 800-year monarchy. Permanence seemed absolute, collapse unthinkable. Beneath the glamorous surface, complete rot festered. Stage 1 always begins with extreme wealth inequality. 27 million French citizens divided into 3 estates. The clergy formed the first estate, controlled 10% of land, paid 0 taxes. Nobility comprised the second estate. 400,000 people owned 25% of land. They paid virtually no taxes either. The third estate contained everyone else, 26 million peasants, workers, middle class. They owned 65% of land, paid all taxes. Calculate those numbers carefully. 1.5% of the population contributed nothing. 98.5% carried the entire burden. Beyond taxation, nobility enjoyed outrageous privileges. They hunted across peasant property, demanded free labor, lived in palaces while children starved. By 1788, failed harvest caused bread prices to spike. Bread consumed 88% of a peasant's budget. When prices doubled, survival became impossible. Meanwhile, nobility continued 5-course feasts through lavish Versailles parties. The disconnect from reality was total and absolute. Stage 2 introduces government corruption and incompetence. King Louis XVI wasn't malicious, just catastrophically weak and indecisive. France was bankrupt from financing wars, including America's revolutionary effort. The government owed staggering sums with no solution. Louis's response revealed his incompetence perfectly. Borrow more money, increase peasant taxes, cut nothing meaningful. Nobility refused tax contributions. Clergy refused likewise. When Louis attempted reforms, they blocked everything. Power holders preferred watching the country burn over surrendering privileges. By 1789, crisis consumed everything. Government couldn't service debts, people couldn't afford sustenance. Louis called the Estates General, an assembly dormant for 175 years. He expected legitimization for new taxes. Instead, he lit the fuse. Stage 3 destroys and radicalizes the middle class. The Third Estate included not just peasants, but lawyers, merchants, educated professionals. They demanded equal representation, 1 vote per person instead of 1 vote per estate. The existing structure gave nobility and clergy permanent 2-to-1 advantage. Louis rejected their demands completely. So on June 17th, 1789, the Third Estate declared itself the National Assembly. They locked themselves inside a tennis court, vowed not to leave until France had a constitution. This moment marks when the educated class abandons the system. When lawyers and merchants declare government illegitimate, revolution becomes inevitable. July 14th, 1789 brought the Bastille storming. Parisians killed prison guards, paraded severed heads through streets on pikes. The revolution had begun, escalation followed rapidly. Stage 4 involves losing faith in institutions. The monarchy, the church, the courts all lost legitimacy simultaneously. The National Assembly abolished feudalism, seized church property, declared human rights. But radicals kept pushing for more. Stage 5 occurs when revolutionary movements gain mass support. The Jacobins, led by Robespierre, demanded extreme measures: execute the king, redistribute all wealth, purge revolution enemies. They gained popular support because moderates had failed to deliver results. The economy remained broken, food remained scarce, people demanded blood payment. January 21st, 1793 saw King Louis XVI beheaded by guillotine publicly. His wife Marie Antoinette followed in October. Then the terror began consuming everyone. Stage 6 brings government overthrow and total chaos. From 1793 to 1794, the Committee of Public Safety executed 40,000 people. Nobles, priests, political opponents, even fellow revolutionaries deemed insufficiently radical. They called it revolution purification. It was mass murder. The guillotine operated daily in Paris. Public executions became entertainment. The purge expanded constantly. First nobility died, then moderate revolutionaries, then anyone accused of counter-revolutionary thoughts. No trials, no evidence. Accusation alone meant death. Robespierre himself eventually died via the system he created. Revolutions always devour their own children without mercy. By 1799, France was completely exhausted. 10 years of chaos, economic destruction, war on all fronts. Napoleon seized power through military coup, crowned himself emperor. The revolution that promised liberty, equality, fraternity ended with military dictatorship. That dictatorship dragged Europe through 15 years of devastating warfare. The lesson crystallizes perfectly. Extreme inequality combined with government incompetence and institutional faith loss creates revolution. Revolution creates chaos, terror, and often dictatorship worse than the original system. Now jump forward 128 years to Russia in 1917. By 1917, Russia remained a backwards empire under Tsar Nicholas II. The Romanov dynasty had ruled 3 centuries. Russia sprawled massively, 180 million people from Europe to Pacific. Beneath the imperial facade, identical rot festered. Stage 1 repeats with extreme wealth inequality. The Tsar and nobility owned everything of value. Peasants, 80% of population, owned nothing at all. They'd been freed from serfdom in 1861, but still worked noble-owned land, paying unaffordable rent. City factory workers labored 12 to 14 hours daily for starvation wages. Child labor was standard practice. Safety regulations didn't exist. Meanwhile, the Tsar inhabited palaces. Nobility hosted balls costing more than peasant lifetime earnings. The gap wasn't merely economic, it was feudal and unsustainable. Stage 2 brought government corruption and incompetence. Tsar Nicholas II was a complete disaster. Weak, indecisive, utterly disconnected from reality. He believed divine right, that God chose him to rule, therefore no reform was necessary. When workers peacefully marched to Winter Palace in 1905, petitioning for better conditions, his guards opened fire. Hundreds died on Bloody Sunday. It destroyed any remaining faith that the Tsar cared about his subjects. Then World War I arrived in 1914. For Russia, it was catastrophic beyond measure. Millions of poorly equipped soldiers sent to die. Officers were incompetent, supply lines collapsed completely. Soldiers fought without ammunition, entire divisions surrendered having no bullets. By 1917, Russia had suffered 3 million casualties. The army was deserting en masse, the economy was imploding, and the Tsar still lived in luxury, still made decisions based on Rasputin's advice, a mystical holy man who controlled the Tsarina. February 1917 brought bread riots to Petrograd, the capital. Women in bread lines started protesting shortages. Workers joined them quickly. The army was ordered to restore order, but soldiers refused to fire on crowds. They mutinied instead. Stage 3 occurs when middle class and military abandon government. When the army won't defend you, government is finished. The Duma, Russia's parliament, demanded Nicholas abdicate immediately. On March 15, 1917, he complied without resistance. After 300 years, the Romanov dynasty ended not with war, but with a whimper. A provisional government formed under Alexander Kerensky. They promised reforms, elections, a constitution. But they made a fatal strategic mistake. They kept Russia fighting in World War I. Soldiers wanted peace immediately. People wanted food desperately. The provisional government delivered neither demand. Stage 4 brought loss of faith in institutions. The provisional government lost legitimacy within months. They were seen as weak, incompetent, serving foreign powers. Into that vacuum stepped Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks. Stage 5 occurs when revolutionary movements gain mass support. Lenin promised 3 simple things that resonated powerfully: peace, land, bread, end the war immediately. Redistribute nobility's land to peasants. Feed the starving people. Simple, direct, irresistible. The Bolsheviks built a disciplined revolutionary organization ready to seize power when opportunity arose. October 25th, 1917, the Bolsheviks launched their coup. They stormed the Winter Palace, arrested the provisional government. Lenin declared Soviet power triumphant. The entire operation took less than 24 hours, almost bloodless initially. What followed was anything but bloodless. Stage 6 brings government overthrow and chaos. The Russian Civil War lasted from 1918 to 1922. The Reds, meaning Bolsheviks, versus the Whites, meaning everyone else. Monarchists, liberals, foreign intervention forces. The Bolsheviks won through absolutely ruthless terror. The Cheka, secret police, executed anyone suspected of counter-revolutionary activity. Entire villages were wiped out completely. In July 1918, the Tsar and his entire family were executed in a basement. Shot and bayoneted, even the children died. By 1922, Bolsheviks controlled Russia completely, but the cost was catastrophic beyond measure. 10 million dead in civil war. Famine killed millions more beyond that. The economy was utterly destroyed. Lenin's promises proved hollow entirely. Peace meant humiliating surrender to Germany. Land meant forced collectivization and famine. Bread meant rationing and starvation. The revolution that promised liberation delivered dictatorship instead. Stalin would seize control in 1924. He would kill 20 million more through purges and engineered famines. The lesson repeats clearly. When government incompetence meets military defeat, meets revolutionary organization, entire systems can collapse within months. And what replaces them is often far worse than the original. Now examine the most recent example, Cuba in 1959. This case differs because Cuba wasn't a backwards peasant society at all. Cuba was relatively prosperous during the 1950s. Cuba had among the highest living standards in Latin America. Havana was called the Monte Carlo of the Caribbean. Tourism, casinos, American investment flowed abundantly. But beneath the glamour, the same pattern existed. Stage 1 brings extreme wealth inequality always. Wealth concentrated in Havana and among elites connected to President Fulgencio Batista's regime. Rural poor, especially in eastern Cuba, lived in grinding poverty. Sugar plantations dominated the economy completely. American companies owned much of the land. Profits flowed out of the country or into elite pockets. Meanwhile, rural Cubans had no health care, no education, no opportunity for advancement. The gap between Havana's nightclubs and rural countryside was enormous and visible. Stage 2 introduces government corruption and incompetence. Batista was a dictator who seized power in a 1952 coup. He canceled elections, ruled by decree. Corruption was total and obvious. Police could be bought, courts were rigged, political opponents were imprisoned or killed. American mobsters ran the casinos with Batista's blessing, paying him substantial cuts. The government existed solely to enrich Batista and his cronies. When people protested, the response was violence. Secret police, torture, disappearances became standard practice. This created rage, especially among young educated Cubans watching their country being looted. Stage 3 radicalizes the middle class. Fidel Castro was a lawyer from a relatively wealthy family. Educated, intelligent, he could have joined the elite. But he saw the corruption and chose revolution instead. In 1953, he led an attack on Moncada barracks. It failed catastrophically. He was imprisoned but gave a famous trial speech. "History will absolve me," he declared to the court. He was released in amnesty in 1955, went to Mexico to plan. December 1956, Castro returned with 82 men on a boat called Granma. They landed in eastern Cuba. Batista's forces ambushed them immediately. Only 20 survived and escaped to Sierra Maestra Mountains. Most revolutionaries would have surrendered then. Castro persisted instead. This is where the pattern accelerates dramatically. Stage 4 brings loss of faith in institutions. Batista's brutality turned the population decisively against him. When the army razed villages suspected of helping rebels, they created more rebels. When police tortured students, their classmates joined the revolution. Castro's forces grew not through ideology, but because Batista was universally hated. And the United States, which had supported Batista, started backing away. When your foreign patron abandons you, you're finished. Stage 5 occurs when revolutionary movements gain mass support. By 1958, Castro had thousands of fighters. Urban resistance cells operated in every city. Peasants supported him as their defender. Batista's army was collapsing internally. Soldiers deserted constantly. Officers fled with stolen money. On January 1st, 1959, Batista fled to Dominican Republic with $300 million. Castro entered Havana victorious on January 8th. Stage 6 brings government overthrow and chaos. Initially, Castro promised democracy, elections, free press. Within months, the mask dropped completely. Political opponents were arrested, tried, executed. The press was censored. Cuba became communist dictatorship. Castro nationalized everything: factories, farms, businesses. Anyone who resisted was imprisoned or executed. Hundreds were shot in the first year. Thousands fled to America. The middle class that supported Castro because they hated Batista learned too late. Revolution doesn't bring freedom, it brings new tyrants. Cuba remained a dictatorship for 60 years. Fidel ruled until 2008, his brother Raul until 2018. The revolution that promised liberation delivered poverty and repression instead. The lesson crystallizes again. Even in relatively developed countries, corruption and brutality can trigger revolution. And revolutionaries, once in power, become the new oppressors. 3 revolutions across 3 countries in 3 centuries. France, 1789, Russia, 1917, Cuba, 1959. Different contexts, different ideologies, but identical 6-stage sequences. Understanding the pattern reveals why what's happening in America should terrify everyone. Stage 1. Extreme wealth inequality exists in all 3 cases. Wealth concentrated in tiny elites while masses struggled. France, nobility and clergy paid no taxes. Russia, czar and nobles owned everything. Cuba, Batista and connected elites looted the country. Specific numbers varied, but the pattern remains identical. When the top 1% control 25 to 40% of wealth, when the gap between rich and poor becomes visible and insulting, resentment builds dangerously. This alone doesn't cause revolution. Inequality has always existed, but it's the foundation that makes everything else possible. Stage 2, government corruption and incompetence appeared in all 3. France, Louis XVI couldn't reform and kept borrowing. Russia, Nicholas II was incompetent and disconnected. Cuba, Batista was purely corrupt dictator. When government exists only to serve elites, when corruption is obvious, when incompetence leads to crisis, people lose all respect for authority. Stage 3, middle class destroyed and radicalized. This is the absolutely key stage. Revolutions don't start with the poorest people. They start when educated middle class loses hope. France, lawyers and merchants led the National Assembly. Russia, students and intellectuals joined the Bolsheviks. Cuba, Castro was a lawyer. His supporters were educated urbanites. When people who should benefit from stability turn against it, revolution becomes highly likely. Stage 4, loss of faith in institutions. When people stop believing in elections, courts, police, the social contract breaks completely. France, the Estates General became Revolutionary Assembly. Russia, soldiers refused to defend the Tsar. Cuba, everyone knew Batista rigged elections. When institutions lose legitimacy, when people believe the system cannot be reformed from within, they look for alternatives outside the system. This is the point of no return. Stage 5, revolutionary movement gains mass support. This is when organized groups offer an alternative vision. France had the Jacobins. Russia had the Bolsheviks. Cuba had Castro's 26th of July movement. They promised justice. They promised to punish the corrupt. They promise a better future. People desperate for change support them not because they love revolutionaries, because they hate the current government more intensely. Stage 6, government overthrown. Chaos follows inevitably. This is the culmination point. The old order collapses completely. France, king beheaded, terror follows. Russia, czar executed, civil war kills millions. Cuba, Batista flees, Castro becomes dictator. And here's the pattern within the pattern that repeats. The revolution never delivers what it promises. It delivers blood, purges, and new tyranny instead. Because revolutions are led by extremists always. And extremists don't build systems, they destroy them. The moderates who wanted reform get executed or exiled. The people who thought revolution would bring freedom learn too late. Chaos is worse than corruption ever was. Now let's examine the United States in 2025. Every warning sign is flashing red. Stage 1, extreme wealth inequality exists and is accelerating. In 1980, the top 1% in America controlled 8% of wealth. Today, they control 32%, higher than France in 1789. The top 0.1%, about 130,000 households, own more than the bottom 90%. That's 117 million households with less combined wealth. The gap between billionaires and everyone else is larger than any time in American history, larger than the Gilded Age, larger than the 1920s. The rich are visible everywhere. Private jets, mega yachts, space tourism. While the middle class can't afford homes, healthcare, or education. While millions work multiple jobs just to survive. The rage is building steadily, and it's completely justified. Stage 2, Government corruption and incompetence exists blatantly. Trust in Congress sits at 15%. Trust in Supreme Court is collapsing rapidly. Half the country believes elections are rigged. Insider trading by Congress members is rampant and documented. Lobbyists write legislation directly. Corporations own politicians through unlimited donations. Nothing gets solved ever. Infrastructure crumbles visibly. Debt exceeds $36 trillion and climbs. Problems that should be solved aren't because government doesn't serve people. It serves donors exclusively. When both parties are seen as corrupt and incompetent, when voters believe the system is rigged against them, faith in democracy dies completely. Stage 3, middle class destroyed and radicalized. The American middle class is being hollowed out systematically. College is unaffordable without crippling debt. Housing is unaffordable in most markets. Healthcare costs bankrupt families regularly. Wage growth stagnates while asset prices explode. Young people, educated young people, can't achieve what their parents had. They're drowning in student debt, can't buy homes, can't start families easily, and they're increasingly angry about it. When lawyers, teachers, engineers, the people who should be succeeding are failing, they radicalize quickly. They look for someone to blame, and they find targets easily. The elites, the billionaires, the system itself. This is exactly how revolutions start. Not with the poorest, with the educated who expected better. Stage 4, loss of faith in institutions. We're here right now in 2025. Trust in media is at all-time historic lows. Trust in police has collapsed in many communities. Trust in elections is broken completely. Half the country believes the 2020 election was stolen. The other half believes January 6th was a coup attempt. Neither side trusts the other at all. Neither side believes the institutions are legitimate anymore. The courts are seen as political tools. The FBI is seen as a political weapon. Everything is viewed through partisan lens. And when that happens, when people stop believing in shared institutions, the country is no longer united. It's two nations occupying the same territory, waiting for a spark to ignite. France had the Estates General. Russia had Bloody Sunday. Cuba had Batista's brutality. America, it could be anything at all. A contested election, an economic crash, a political assassination, a police incident that goes viral. The kindling is dry and stacked. We're just waiting for the match. We're in stage 4 right now, and history says stage 5 comes next rapidly. Stage 5, revolutionary movement gains mass support. This hasn't happened yet, not fully anyway. But the pieces are forming clearly. On the left, there's growing support for socialist policies. Wealth redistribution, eat the rich rhetoric intensifies. On the right, there's growing support for authoritarianism, strongman leaders, extra legal measures. Both sides increasingly believe the system is broken beyond repair, that it needs to be torn down and rebuilt. When the moderates lose control completely, when the extremes gain mass support, stage 5 arrives. And we're closer than most people realize. Stage 6 is what no one wants to think about. Because stage 6 is chaos without limits. In France, 40,000 executed in the terror. In Russia, 10 million dead in civil war. In Cuba, dictatorship lasting 60 years. American exceptionalism says it can't happen here. We're too stable, too wealthy, too democratic. That's exactly what they said in France. Russia was an empire that had lasted 3 centuries. Cuba was prosperous and modern for its region. And all 3 collapsed following the pattern. The pattern doesn't care about exceptionalism. So what would stage 6 look like in America? No one knows exactly, but history provides clues. Political violence escalates dramatically, not riots, organized violence. Assassinations, insurgency tactics. The military and police fracture internally. Some units side with government, others with revolutionaries. Supply chains break down completely. Food shortages, fuel shortages. The economy collapses because no one trusts anything. States try to secede or refuse federal authority. And foreign powers interfere eagerly. China, Russia, they'd love watching America burn. The chaos could last years or decades. Millions could die in the process. And what emerges on the other side won't be the America we knew. It could be authoritarian. It could be fractured into regions. It could be something worse than anyone imagines. That's stage 6, written in history. And the pattern says, once you're in stage 4, stopping it becomes extremely difficult. 3 revolutions, 3 identical patterns across centuries. France, Russia, Cuba collapsed. Each time the elites never saw it coming. Each time they thought they were completely safe. Each time they thought the masses would never rise. And each time the wealth gap, the government corruption, the institutional faith loss combined into an explosion. That explosion destroyed the existing order completely. The United States is in stage 4 right now. The wealth gap is worse than France in 1789. The government is as dysfunctional as Russia in 1917. The faith in institutions is as broken as Cuba in 1958. And the pattern says stage 5 and 6 are approaching. Maybe we can stop it through reform. Maybe we can fix the system before revolution. Maybe institutions can repair themselves, but the pattern suggests otherwise. History suggests otherwise, and the warning signs are everywhere you look. 3 times it happened across history. Each time they thought they were different and special. Each time the pattern won decisively.